You always felt with Ruth that she had that she was a humanist at heart?
I mean, although I'm employed to look after the children, Ruth didn't ever make me feel that way. She used to call me family, and I called them my other family.
Never a fortnight went by that she wouldn't come in to catch up with her, ask how we were, how our families were.
She was a very genuine person. What she said, she meant. She didn't waste words.
Ruth had very much a direct and upfront way, which not that many British people have, I think.
Ruth was a relatively quiet person and quite a modest person, but she was a person who had very strong views and principles and would have a good argument or discussion with people who had differing views.
She was a very strong woman, and she got on well with other women who were fairly strong and certain of where they were going.
Ruth was a very deeply committed person, deeply believed in fairness and justice and a more egalitarian society.
You would feel as if her mind was going from one thing to the other, that she was kind of quick in thinking.
She coped with everything so well, didn't she? She wasn't, nothing seemed to faze her, she just did it.
I think people did find her a little bit
difficult to
scary.
approach. Yeah. If you don't know her.
She was so good at everything.
She
She was nice with it though, wasn't she? Like you said, she probably wasn't a perfectionist in some ways, but that was a good thing that she wasn't a perfectionist. She got on with things, and
She just juggled her work, her hobbies, but her children always came first.
The strength and the weakness, possibly, of the Bridgewater family's school of training children was to instill everybody with a pretty fierce, independent view, and to come to that view through your experiences and your readings and your discussions, and then probably to stick fairly hard to that view. And I suspect that we've all been instilled with that view. I suspect, thinking about it now, probably Ruth and myself have probably got that in spades.
If you wanted to tell her something she thought she ought to know, you'd pick your moment fairly carefully. Make sure the time was right to say whatever it is you thought, rightly or wrong. Sometimes you do, don't you? You think, actually, I must say this because she may well be aware of it, but if she's not, I need to say this.
As a family, I think people quite often associate the Bridgewaters with being quite strong-willed, argumentative, quite possibly, putting our point across quite strongly, stubborn even. And I think that's true, but I don't actually remember ever having arguments with Ruth. Ruth and Ben could wind each other up, chronically. They knew how to push each other's buttons. Ben could especially, push Ruth's buttons.
I think that there has obviously been some noise around the fact that I used to wind my sister up. I suspect in reality I probably have wound my sister up, or my sister's up, no more than any brother ever has done in the past.
But no, we were very careful as adults to keep the relationship good and not to say things that we either of us would regret.
She's got a good temper, Ruthie. If you cross her, she was quite cross. Well, we all crossed at one time or another. But it was a fairly quick storm. It wasn't a typhoon, it was a sort of quick storms.
Ruth, if she lost her temper, which she didn't do very often, she would storm upstairs to her room and slam the door. And then we actually bought another carpet for her bedroom, which had a slightly longer pile. So she couldn't actually slam the door. So she was pretty miffed about that. But she didn't lose her temper that often. She was pretty good-tempered, really.
She wasn't bad-tempered, but you wouldn't want to cross her. So she wasn't bad-tempered, but she would lose her temper if she felt it warranted it.
I was on a drag lift, and I was young, the youngest, and kept falling off, and I get really annoyed, but kept keeping falling off and just left stranded. And so one time I went up halfway up the lift, fell off, and I could see Ruth coming up behind me, and I thought I'm just going to knock her off too, so she can be with me, which I did, and she was pretty cross. But other than that, there's no kind of strong words.
I often saw Ruth cross, And I'm sure she saw me very cross as well, and it was always with the children. Going to school, particularly sort of with the younger ones, you know, refusing to walk to school, crying, not putting their coats on, and I would often see Ruth very cross and had her very shouty voice on, and the kids were still sort of trailing behind. It was always quite funny because after we'd got them into school, we often used to meet in the yard and discuss kind of how cross we'd been, and she used to say to me, I'm sure you must be able to hear me from your house shouting, and of course I couldn't, but I know exactly how she felt. I think there was probably a lot of shouting going on some mornings.
But it wasn't just the knitting, it was the tea and cakes, remember?
Oh, the cakes.
Yes.
Got your orange cake. Oh, num, num, num.
Yeah, because Ruth would always have a cake that she'd just taken out of the oven.
Remember the Christmas where she'd left a cake in the cleaner's cupboard?
Yes, for the cleaners.
For the cleaners, when they came in the next morning. They opened the cupboard where all the mops and that on. There was a big Christmas cake that the kids had made for the cleaners.
She'd been complaining to me that there was no facility for bikes at the Village Green Surgery, and she liked to bike to work sometimes. So I took the trouble to go out and buy a bike locking mechanism which I had attached to the wall. And her response to that was absolutely astonishing. I mean, she actually said, you know, she says, God, I feel so special. She actually took some of the doctors out and showed them the bike rack that had been installed on her behalf outside the front of the surgery, you know.
She liked to spoil me at times, which I thought was really, really nice of her. Very generous, very kind. And she won a makeover once. You know, those makeover 2000s. We have the glamour shots. Not page 3. No, not those kind of glamour shots. And she says, so we went to this place in Newcastle, but we kept waiting quite a while actually, and Ruth was quite annoyed, so she'd gone up and said a few things in her Ruth way, and the next thing they're all scurrying about like little mice, and we all get taken upstairs, and we had to look through the books, and there was one picture, Harley Davidson, you know, the motorbike with the leather and the blonde hair, and we both looked at each other and went, nah.
I drove up one there once and the tide was coming in. It had fish and chips all sitting on the wall at Whitley Bay, and then the tide was coming in and crashing over the rocks, and the children all went and stood, all 7 of them in a line, fully dressed, in the waves, with the tide coming in and crashing in, and Ruth and I sitting there watching them, hoping none of them were going to fall in, and I delegating Ruth to dive in and fetch them if any of them did.
I never really saw her as being kind of outdoorsy and fit, and yet there was a couple of times when it was just clear that she was not just both fit but highly kind of driven. And she came out to Belize in 2004, it would have been, and I was working in the jungle there, and I think it was one of the few times she'd been away from her family for 2 weeks.
That was great because she used to send emails to the school, emails to Eleanor's class and emails to Daniel's class separately. And the teachers used to write, you know, that they'd sat on the floor and gone through it all.
At that point, I was studying palms in this area. It was a 100,000 hectare reserve, just limestone forest, very little water, you know, kind of desperate country for working, and had to cover this whole area by foot. And she came out, and I said, look, you know, I still have to work, so you know, would you be happy to work with the teams that we've got together? And all the guys that were there were kind of ex-foresters or current foresters, and so every day, you know, we had to get up at 4 and had to walk for 12, 15 kilometres, which doesn't sound like much, but actually in the tropics, 30 degrees, no water, it was very unforgiving terrain. And when we pitched up in the camp, because we were camping there, and these guys saw Ruth, who's quite, you know, she looks very like a kind of slightly not frail, but just not a strong physical person, and you could see them thinking, you know, oh no, we got, you know, he's got the who's going to be in the girls' blouse team sort of thing. And then, you know, she got up in the morning and off we went, and you know, she just kept on going. And you know, by the end of the day, you could see them thinking, you know, respect this lady. She's something else.
Whenever the children would get factious, I used to take them up to the top of Leckhampton Hill, across the top, down the other side, and bring them home. By which time I'd be exhausted, and I didn't really mind if they made some noise then. And she was always a very good walker, always walk any distance.